and thank you for inviting me today as an artist. As Roger said, I'm going to lead a workshop shortly. There's little bags on the table that has everything you need. But before I do that, I would like to spend some time just talking about art and beauty and why I believe it matters. I think my first slide, yeah? Great, thank you. So throughout history, philosophers and theologians from Plato to Augustine to contemporary thinkers like Tillich have talked about this ancient triad of goodness, truth, and beauty. And for the last few hundred years, the church has focused a lot on truth and goodness, but sadly, beauty has at times slipped from the evangelical consciousness. And these ancient triads describe the character, nature, and presence of God in our lives. And as an artist, I stand on the territory of beauty, and I bear witness to its power. I believe that we all have this transcendental desire within us, or as C.S. Lewis calls, an inconsolable longing. And I believe that beauty and art speak directly to that longing. Beauty beckons us beyond the immediate to the more, to something eternal. Beauty echoes the presence of God. Beauty brings the taste and touch of our Creator's heart. Whether we encounter beauty in music, art, poetry, nature, the embrace of friends and family, or the kindness of a stranger, we encounter God. In the Narnia series by C.S. Lewis, one of my favourite books in that series is The Horse and the Boy. And there's a scene in that story where the boy is riding his horse through a darkened woodland. And in the dead of night, he hears this noise. He hears the sound of breathing. And his heart begins to race. And he calls out into the darkness and he says, "Who is there?" And it is the voice of Aslan, who we know represents God. And Aslan says, "It is I." And the boy says, "Well, how long have you been there?" And Aslan said, "I've always been here. It's only now you hear my breath." And that is what the arts do. And that is what beauty does. It awakens us. It is an awakening to the breath of the divine. It is an awakening to the breath of God. Art is not about answering questions. Walter Brueggemann says it really well when he said, "The role of the artist is not explanation. Rather, the role of the artist is to disclose, to reveal, and to show what has not been seen or said until that instant. To show that there is a season of loss not to be avoided, a hope beyond, and a deep time of brooding between." I'm a ceramicist. Some of you may know my work, and for some I'll be completely new to you. And I make, as you can see on the screen, these pots. I call them my scar pots. I make other things too, but these pieces are what I'm going to talk about today. There is a scar pot on each table. During the workshop, you'll have some time to pick it up and hold it. And these scar pots are inspired by kintsugi. Many of you have probably heard of kintsugi now. It's become very mainstream. Apparently, it even featured in a Beyonce video. So it's as mainstream as you can get. Many churches and charities have used kintsugi as a symbol of hope and restoration and the beauty of repair and the beauty of redemption. The original story behind these pots, oh, by the way, for those who don't know what kintsugi is, it's an ancient Japanese technique of mending broken pots with gold. And as a result, the pot becomes more beautiful and more precious because of its wounds, not despite. The original story behind this pot, I made it 12 years ago. I made it for a dear friend of mine who was going through breast cancer surgery. And I just wanted, it was my little visual poem to her, my ode to her. It was my way of telling her that her scars were beautiful because they told her story. And her story was one of hope and healing and tremendous courage. But occasionally, as an artist, you make a piece of work, and very occasionally, it grows wings and flies. And I think this little pot has done that in the last few years. If I can get my next slide. I had an opportunity with Passion Art, which is Leslie's charity, which she founded and led. And Leslie had organised the Passion Art Trail across Manchester. I'm sure many of you walked that trail. It was a thing of beauty. She used both sacred and secular buildings across the city of Manchester, placing artwork in those buildings, creating dialogue and conversation between both secular and sacred spaces, and creating this visual and spiritual pilgrimage across the streets of Manchester. It was an astonishing thing, and I had the privilege of being in it. Leslie had seen this little pot of mine, and she said, "Do you think it could be an exhibition?" So I made 40, and I placed them on the altar of St. Anne's Church during a period of Lent. And to be honest, I placed them on the altar of St. Anne's, and I walked away from that exhibition, and I didn't really think much. And then about 2 days later, I got an email from somebody to say, "I saw your exhibition in St. Anne's. It moved me to tears. I too am going through breast cancer surgery." And then the next day, I got another email from somebody else to say, "I saw your scarred pots. I'm struggling with my mental health." And then I got another email from somebody suffering bereavement, and the emails kept coming. My inbox kept filling up with stories and stories of wounds and scars. And I realized at that moment that when people looked at my scarred pots, they didn't see my friend's scar. They saw their scar reflected back to them. And they felt seen in that moment and hopefully held. And in that moment, I realized art's great power, its wonder-working power. It has a power to give some of our deepest, most gut-wrenching emotions color and texture and form. And by doing so, says, "You're not alone." And so my next slide, after exhibiting them, I had this mad idea, as artists tend to do. And I thought, I wonder if I just placed them on the streets for people to find. Would it still speak into people's stories? Would it still speak into the interior landscape of our lives? And so I partnered with Stoke Festival, and I placed 40 little scarred pots in little boxes with little cards on the streets of Stoke for members of the public to find and keep as a gift. I left them in park benches, outside train stations, public gardens. I love the idea that art and beauty is not a luxury, it's a birthright. Anyone could find these pots. You didn't have to go into an art gallery, you didn't need to know anything about art or fine art, but that this little piece of art could speak into your story, could be a balm in your day. I believe that beauty matters because we matter, and we matter because we are made in God's image. I love this idea of blessing a city or town with beauty. Like, what would that look like to bless a town or a city with beauty? People would often say to me, aren't you scared they're going to get broken? But I love the scandal of it. I love the fact that it's porcelain, it's gold luster, it's the most expensive materials I could use. And there is a risk it could get broken, but it was a risk I was more than willing to take. I called it my benediction in porcelain. I really wanted these little pots to bear witness to our stories, to speak of new life and new beginning in our deepest pain. I believe that wherever there is hope of new life, there is a little whisper of the resurrection. I believe that we are not just called to believe in the resurrection, but also to practice the resurrection, to believe in the power of Jesus to restore and make all things new. The response was overwhelming from the public. I had quite literally people running up to me on the street. And the stories, they told me the stories then and there. There was an option, I left a little card, you could upload a story with a QR code to a website. say how the pot connected with you, where you found it. But I met a lot of people, and they told me it then and there, and they floored me, the stories, and they still do, and you will hear some of them shortly. Art can speak the unspeakable. Anne Lamott says, the best works of art are like symphonies of our experience, signalling what we didn't know to be true, but we do now. In art, we feel the breath of the invisible, of the eternal. And if I have my next slide, thank you. Then, with Passion Art again, Passion Art funded the project. And with their funding, I could scale up the project. So I went from 40 pots in Stoke to 120 for Manchester. And I partnered with another artist, a text artist called Micah Purnell. He's also based in Manchester. Micah's work is a lot of anti-consumerist. He's a text artist, so he does counter consumerist messaging. He would buy a billboard space and just take over that billboard space and write, "You are enough." And his work really fitted in nicely to what I was doing with the scarred pots, and we've worked together before. So Micah designed these little plaques. They were made by Chapel in the Fields. I'll talk about them shortly. And he made 120 of those. I made 120 of pots. And we scattered them across the streets of Manchester over 2 weeks. And we give lots of people clues every day. People followed us. We give them hints and clues of where we'd be at. And we called the project Gift to the City. Hidden Art, Found Stories. The aim of this project was simple. It was for people to feel seen and less alone, and hopefully held by something greater than themselves. My next slide. Thank you. Because I had 120, I started to become a bit playful, hiding these pots around the city. So I placed one in the hand of the Emmeline Pankhurst statue, if anyone knows Manchester. And actually, a little 5-year-old girl found that. Her mum emailed or uploaded it on the website to say she'd been teaching her daughter about the suffragettes and had brought her into Manchester just to look at the statue, and the little 5-year-old found my pot, and it's now in her bedroom, which was lovely because it's quite a light story compared to what I normally receive. In the top right is Manchester Cathedral. I placed some inside buildings. Majority are out on the street, just outside train stations, park benches. Just I like the idea of people stumbling into them on the way home from work, running to get a tree, and you find this little object. But yes, I did place some inside. I placed some inside charities in Manchester, so Maggie's, Macmillan's, a mental health charity for young people, and the bottom corner image is Hope for Justice. And I love the idea of just those scar pots going directly into the hands of people who are bearing unspeakable scars. Again, you'll hear some of these stories shortly. If I get the next slide. Yeah, so lots of people in Manchester gave us instant feedback on social media. Some people did go onto the website, some people it was instant. I love this one on the left. The guy said, "Amazing, gift to the city, Rachel host ceramics. The priest Paul even made me a brew." Good people. So I placed a number in St Anne's Church. St Anne's has been such a support to Passion Art, and I think that is really down to Leslie's connection with them. I think by the end, she could have asked to put any art piece in that church and they would have said yes. So St Anne's were very supportive, and the vicar there, every time somebody came in to look for the art piece, he had the kettle on, the tin of biscuits was open, and he was hearing stories, because all you had to do was say, "Why are you looking for the pot?" And you will hear a story for the next half hour. What a privilege for them as well. And I also deliberately placed them in churches because I wanted people to know that these quiet, contemplative spaces within the city were theirs if they needed them. Spaces for stillness, spaces to rest one's soul. One lady went in, I bumped into her inside St Anne's. She was looking for my pot. And she said, "I've lived in Manchester my whole life. I've never stepped foot in this church." And I simply said to her, "It's for you. This is your space. If there is ever a moment where you need to be held or abide in something greater than yourself, this space is for you." Just like people don't walk into art galleries, I think people don't walk into churches for similar reason. And I've placed some of these pots also in churches during Lent and Advent. Sometimes churches ask if I can put a little installation up. And I have had so many vicars say to me, Rachel, I have had more conversations through these pots than I have through my sermons. Art can speak on a deeper level, even a deeper level than words. I also placed them in churches in the city because I really wanted to show that the church takes suffering and loss seriously. I believe that Jesus took loss and suffering seriously. In fact, he went straight towards it. I recently read a beautiful book by Jane Manfredi, and she said, sometimes the most honest thing the church can do is howl with sorrow and welcome the mournful to join along with us. Or as the theologian Fleming Rutledge says, steer towards the pain. This is the most Christian thing we can do for another human being. It reflects the love of the crucified one. In the cross, we see that God has not only steered towards the pain, but has taken the pain upon himself. Steer towards the pain. The church takes loss seriously. My next slide. We partnered and collaborated with Chapel in the Fields. Chapel in the Fields, again, is based up near Dunamassy, around Manchester. It's a little Methodist church. Maybe some of you have been there. They host quiet days and offer their premises for leadership days and church conferences and so on. I've got to know the leader of Chapel in the Fields over the years. He was a furniture maker before he became a minister, and now he's combining the two. He's just retired, actually. And they've got a new leader in there who's doing interesting things with the arts as well. But Kevin would take groups of men through social prescription, and he would teach them how to make bird boxes and the objects out of clay. And then through that, these men would start to talk. They would start to share their stories. And I asked Kevin if he would make a number of boxes for my pots to rest in, just to give them a little bit of protection on the street. And so a group of those men through social prescription made these little boxes. They made them out of recycled pews. And as they made them, they talked and they shared their stories and they shared their wounds. And I love the layers in the project. The pot is my friend's scar. The person who made the box has a scar. And the person who finds it also has a scar. Layers of stories and layers of scars. There's actually an episode on Songs of Praise based on Chapel in the Fields. It's still probably in BBC iPlayer. I'd really recommend you watch it, and you can see some of the work that they're doing with these men through woodworking. Next slide. Yeah. Then we got ambitious. Then we took the project to Belfast. Again, this was funded by Passion Art, and we partnered with the Cathedral Quarter Festival there, an arts festival based in Belfast. I found it very emotional taking it to Belfast. As you can probably hear, I'm from Northern Ireland originally, and taking it to the place and the people who have formed me, but also have known what it means to be scarred. If there is ever a city that knows what it's like to be scarred, it's Belfast. And you can still see the scars. You don't have to look very far. But also, if there is a city that has understood the beauty and fragility of restoration and the beauty and fragility of repair, it's Belfast. So it was a beautiful thing to bring home. And I partnered again with Micah. He loves Belfast. I think he loves Belfast more than I love Belfast. So he made 100 plaques. I made 100 pots. And I partnered with a local Belfast artist who painted little abstract seascapes on bits of reclaimed wood. So bits of pallet board, bits of broken wood she'd find in skips, and she'd paint something beautiful on it. That idea of bringing beauty to brokenness. And again, it fitted really lovely with our theme. But not only that, this was the friend who inspired the scars in the first place. It was her mastectomy scars. So it was to bring it home and to partner with my friend. Felt like it was full circle. Next slide. Yeah, as I said, lots of people commented on the website of what the pot meant to them. I feel like art is a ritual. I feel the stories are spilling out of people on the streets. They want to tell someone. It's just that no one has asked in many ways. And art creates rituals to speak your story. But a lot of the time they tell me on the street. And I have felt more like a priest than an artist. But I am beginning to believe that all artists are priests. I believe that our stories are sacred. And this work hopefully bears witness to those stories. In Manchester, I met a lot of women my age who were coming into Manchester to find the pot, but not for themselves, for their terminally ill mothers. That was really common in Manchester. I met one woman who found the pot for her mum with stage 4 lung cancer and then sent me a little photo of her mum holding the pot. This was a nurse that I bumped into in Belfast, and she works with people going through cancer treatment, and she was going to bring it into work the next day to show her patients. I met a man in Manchester, and his daughter had heard us on the radio. We managed to get onto Manchester radio again, this all through Leslie's contacts. She led the way in this project. And the 17-year-old had heard us on the radio, and she said, "Dad, find me one of those pots." So he was on a mission to find this pot. And when he found it, he was delighted. And he said, "I'm going to go home. I'm going to show my daughter this pot, and I am going to be Dad of the Year." He was so proud of himself. And he was quite banterful and jokey with me. And then just like that, he said it. He said, "My 17-year-old daughter was in the Manchester arena bombing." I don't know what that pot meant to her, but I know it meant something because she sent her dad to find it. But I also know it meant something to him because he had to go on the pilgrimage to find it. And pilgrimage is such a thread throughout this project. My last story I'll share with you is a lady called Mary, and I met her in Belfast. It was the last day of the project. I had just set my pot down outside quite an iconic pub in Belfast. And this older lady came over, and she took her earphones out. She picked the pot out of the box, and she held it. She cradled it for a long time. And I went over, and I said, "Hi, I'm Rachel. I'm the artist. Did you know about the project, or did you just stumble across the pot?" And she said, "Rachel, I have been looking for your pot for 2 days." And she called it her pilgrimage of hope, her words. And she shared how she had lost her husband after many years of marriage, and searching for this pot is what her grief felt like, something beautiful to hold. And then she went onto the website that evening. We had a beautiful conversation, nearly an hour probably, outside that pub, and it was an honour to hear it. And she went onto the website that night and she uploaded a story, and it was 2 pages long. This was quite a cultural difference, I have to say. In Stoke, the stories were 1 sentence. Unedited, raw, there it is. In Belfast, they were about 2 pages. Because we are the land of storytellers and the land of many, many words. So she went onto the website, she uploaded a beautifully written story, really emotionally articulate. And she said that after she found my pot, she went home and she started to garden for the first time since losing her husband. And she said this little phrase that has stayed with me and lived in me. She said, "I attended to new shoots. I attended to new shoots." And there was something tender and beautiful about that line that I thought spoke of hope, resurrection, hope. In Nick Cave's book, Faith, Hope and Carnage, he talks about the morality of art, that art is a force of good. It brings solace to the world. It is a form of spiritual sustenance and kindness that may go in some small way in helping people with their lives. I really hope Gift to the City has done that in some way. A small gesture of hope in a hurting world. A balm to the soul. A whisper of the resurrection. I would be open to continuing this project if the funding comes through. I thought after Belfast, I have set it down, but I'll never say never. But in the meantime, it has evolved beautifully into a workshop. And I have been invited into churches and charities philosophy conference, and even corporate spaces. I've even led them in boardrooms. And I'm going to lead you in that workshop now.